morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Lou.
Good morning.
Today we have a special show, somewhat different from our previous ones where we talked about my earlier phases of psychiatry in my memoirs having to do with hypnosis and the use of hypnosis for treatment of medical conditions and the use of hypnosis to solve crimes. What I'd like to do today is to talk about my experience with opioids, and treatment of opiate-addicted patients. I started that sometime in the mid-1990s, so it's about 20 plus years that I've been doing this, have a lot of experience doing it. And to start off with, we have a patient who can basically talk, without giving his name, about some of his experiences. Are you there, Joe?
Yes.
I meant just...
That's not really my name. That's not really... How funny is that?
Okay, I don't think that's narrowing it down all that much. So.
No, million Joes.
So good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, doctor.
I know you're driving, so just take a few minutes of your time. Just wanted to give our audience and friends a glimpse into what exactly happens to somebody who is dependent on opiates. Would you be willing to share a little bit of your thoughts?
Well, yeah, sure. It's horrible. It's the first thing you think of when you get up, and it's the last thing you think of. All you think of all day is you got to either get heroin or you have to get whatever, Oxycontin, Percocet, and you have to concentrate on getting it every day. So all you do is plan on how you're going to get the money and how you're going to buy it. So it's terrible.
And so... How go back to how you and I first met, and let's take it from there. Let's see what happened with you and how we were able to get past this horrible addiction.
Well, I got to the point where, I was just doing 20, 30 bags a day of heroin, and I was stealing Oxycontin from my brother, and I was ready to just probably call it a day and figure something out to end it. And someone had said, there's a doctor who is unbelievable at a specific hospital. Go see him and see what he can do for you. And that's what you did. I met you. You talked to me for a long time. And then I remember you put me on this program with taking... First, it was two different things, and then it was one of them was Suboxone.
Right.
And it was unbelievable, because going through withdrawal, heroin or opiate withdrawal is the worst, And I was concerned with that, and you just said, just trust me. I started that program with the Suboxone, and from day one, I didn't go through withdrawal. I didn't suffer. I put that pill under my tongue, and it was crazy how I didn't suffer.
Would you be willing to tell the audience what exactly opiate withdrawal feels like and how many Suboxones under the pill you were taking right in the beginning?
Well, heroin withdrawal is you're sick. You're sick. Your stomach is sick. You're sweating. You're in pain. You're anxious. It's the worst. It's like anything you see on TV. When someone's going through withdrawal, you can't sleep. You can't stop fidgeting, and you're in pain. You're literally in pain. It's horrible. You're sweating. I never had to go through that, to be honest with you, because of the treatment. And you take the pill, put it under your tongue, it dissolves, and if you don't take any opiates, if you don't snort heroin or do anything, you're not suffering. It's just like nothing. You just get through that day without suffering, and then the next day you take your orange pill or whatever color they change once in a while, different colors, It's a wonder drug.
And,
it's a wonder drug.
And when you're taking it, do you have cravings or thoughts of wanting to take heroin or OxyContin
Nope.
or anything else?
Nothing. No cravings. I mean, well, of course you're always going to miss that high, but you have to want to stop. And once you decide you want to stop, this is what allows you to stop. And I figure, hey, if this is, I don't drink, I don't smoke weed, I don't smoke pot, I don't take any drugs. So I figure if my worst thing is if I have to take a little orange pill, half of a little orange pill under my tongue every morning, and I could get through the day, and it's not even nothing now. It's just normal. You feel normal, you feel good, and that's it. It's wonderful.
I haven't seen you in a number of years, and another physician is now treating you. So you're now down to half a pill under your tongue once a day?
Yeah, what I do is I take half of an 8 milligram. I take half in the morning, and then most of the time I just don't even bother with the other half. But if I start to feel like I want to, it's hard to explain what the feeling's like. I just break the other piece. I break half of a half, and I put it under my tongue, and that's it.
And you're like normal with that?
Normal.
Okay.
Wonderful.
All right.
And you can't take any opiates, by the way. I think once you're taking Suboxone, it counteracts the opiate, I believe.
Yeah,
so you wouldn't even get high, you know?
Very good point. You actually go through severe and immediate withdrawals if you mix the Suboxone with another opiate. You yourself have never had experience with that, have you, or have you?
No. But I know someone who has.
Okay. All right.
Said,
I will talk about that. Do you need to go? I know you're driving.
Well, I'm waiting for. I'm waiting.
You're okay?
Probably any second.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to.
All right.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for your time, and I'll let you go. And I really appreciate your having spoken to the audience and to me. Thank you.
Well, it was my pleasure, and I want to say one thing. You saved my life, so that's all I'm going to say.
All right. My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you. Be well.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, friends, you just heard this patient who I treated, I would say, maybe 15, 20 years ago with this. And let me basically back up. He had to go, so we decided to start off the program with him.
Right.
But opiate addiction, how I got involved in it, you've seen my career as I talk about it in the late 70s and 80s. And in the 1990s, a painkiller was introduced to us at the hospital called buprenorphine. It was an injection, and you gave this injection subcute, right under the skin. Basically, it was for pain, and severe pain. You had to document that the patient was in severe pain, but if you did that, the pain, it was an amazing painkiller. What we also found is that this buprenorphine had a specific predilection to opiate receptors. So it is an antagonist as well as an agonist. So for those who may, just for in lay people's terms,
Yeah, please.
if this is an opiate receptor, each one of us has receptors for various things. For instance, most of us know that on our tongue we have receptors for sweet, for sour, for spice, etc.
Right.
And when the corresponding stimulus touches those receptors, sparks fly, and you say, wow.
Yeah.
I remember my grandson, when he was just born in the hospital, they needed to take blood from him, and we were concerned about how much this would pain him, the needle, and they said, don't worry, we've got the magic touch. So they took a dropper full of like liquid sugar, and they held it in his mouth, and just when they were going to hit him with the needle, they squirted sugar in his mouth, which he had never had. He'd just been born. And you should have seen his eyes. Forget the needle.
Yeah.
His eyes like wide open. I said, wow, what was that? The sugar. So that was the first time his receptors, tongue receptors, faced sugar.
Right.
Similarly, we have opiate receptors. Those are meant for pain. for opiates. And basically, we may have them, and if we never had pain, we've never had opiates, those receptors die with us, never having experienced an opiate coming onto them.
Okay.
So here's a receptor, here's an opiate molecule that goes on, latches onto the opiate receptor, a stimulus forms and goes into the brain, and the person says, wow. Two things happen. One is whatever pain there may be gets eliminated if that opiate is effective for that patient. And the second thing that happens potentially for some people is they get a high, they get a buzz, or they get a feeling of well-being.
Right.
Now, people who are in severe pain, when that opiate hits the opiate receptor, they don't get the high. They just feel relief from the pain. People who are not in pain, the opiate receptor gets stimulated.
Interesting.
They feel high.
Yeah.
So in today's day and age, Lou, you've heard about the opiate crisis.
Yes.
People are dying by the thousands all over the United States, all over the world. So these opiate receptors, in the 1990s, we found this buprenorphine, which is a synthetic that mimics an opiate. Mm-hmm. Not only does it mimic it, so if you have an opiate receptor that's saying, I'm looking for an opiate, this buprenorphine goes in more powerfully than the actual opiate. Much more powerful. Imagine that there's a girlfriend and she's got two boyfriends. One is an opiate, one is a buprenorphine.
Yeah.
Buprenorphine muscles the opiate off. It's much more potent and latches on to the opiate receptor in a way that it doesn't allow the opiate to get on.
I see. Okay.
So as a result, the opiate receptor is so satisfied with this buprenorphine, doesn't even crave for the opiate.
I see.
So
yeah.
The receptor is very satisfied with the buprenorphine, says, I really don't have any need for an opiate. What a fantastic medication. Problem is that if there's an opiate receptor and an opiate marriage already, when buprenorphine comes in, it pries the opiate off and latches onto the opiate receptor. And that prying off causes a severe and immediate withdrawal.
Oh, that's why you can't use.
So you have to be actually going through, for the first time, you actually have to be going through opiate withdrawal, at least to some extent, which suggests that there's no more opiate on the receptor before you can take the first buprenorphine. So what is an opiate withdrawal? I think you heard earlier that an opiate withdrawal causes severe pain. People don't die from opiate withdrawal, but they
just
feel
wish they did.
as if they're dying.
Yeah.
They wish they were dead.
Yeah.
They are in severe pain, they're doubled over. You heard the term cold turkey. Mm-hmm. So cold turkey refers to the fact that all the hair on the body of the person going through withdrawal stands up, like a turkey that's been put in the freezer. All of the hairs are standing up. You're cold kicking. You're kicking the habit,
yes,
which means that your muscles go into spasm. Your legs are kicking, so that's why it's called kicking the habit.
Wow.
Every orifice in your body is leaking. So your eyes are watering, your nose is watering, you're salivating, you're passing urine, you have diarrhea, you're leaking from every orifice in your body. You're doubled over in pain, everything is in cramps, and it's a horrible, horrible thing that lasts for maybe a couple days, few days. During the time that person is going through that withdrawal, if you introduce a little bit of buprenorphine, at that time what I was talking about is the pain management vehicle was intramuscular or subcutaneous. It wasn't in oral form at the time. We said, are you in pain? And if the person were to be able to document that they were in pain, we were allowed to give this buprenorphine and give it subcutaneously, and within a second, the person said, oh,
really?
I feel back to normal.
Yeah.
I have no cravings for any opiates. I have no desire to do it.
Within seconds.
Within seconds. Mm-hmm. But a few hours later, they'd say, okay, I'm feeling like I need it again. So the catch was, in the beginning, you need it. As you heard the patient before say, in the beginning he was taking like 3-4 tablets in a day. Now he's just taking 1/2 a tablet in the morning, and that's it. He doesn't need it anymore. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning, till the receptors get used to this, you might need to give it more frequently. But in the beginning, people used to throng our emergency room with quote unquote pain
Right.
to get this buprenorphine. These were people who were addicted to opiates. And of course, the problem was when you discharged them after, say, 2 days or 3 days, they were free of any opiates. They felt back to normal. They said, this is like God coming down to help me. Only problem is we couldn't give them anything to take home with them.
Right.
So they would go back onto the street. They'd feel the withdrawal within a short period of time, and they go back to using again. So it was a vicious cycle.
Right.
So given that I had a lot of experience using it in the hospital to treat opiate withdrawal, I was itching to say, how can I use this to the many people that were outpatient that could use it? And B, how could we prevent these people who we were treating from going out and going back onto the street to use these drugs again?
Right.
Now, so the audience knows that opiate comes in various forms. Opiates come in various forms. Number one is painkillers like OxyContin, Darvon, Darvocet, those kind of things, Furanol. And it also comes in heroin, morphine, stuff like that.
Right.
So as you go down the road towards heroin, it's a lot cheaper. OxyContin, I think, was selling at that time for $80 a pill.
Yeah, wow.
And here you buy them in the bags, as the patient was saying earlier. You buy it in bags, it's much cheaper. And so as these people who are able to steal and to borrow and to work and pay out of their own funds run out of money because the addiction just keeps climbing, then they turn to street drugs, heroin. So the first...
And then eventually fentanyl.
Well, actually,
because
heroin...
of the economics, right?
Yeah, heroin, I don't know the cost basis 100%, but I think heroin, the lowest, cheapest form is heroin, but I could be wrong.
Yep.
I'm not a consumer, so I don't know. So the first time I was thrilled with this, and as a physician, I knew a lot of the physicians in the area. A physician's wife made an appointment to come to see me in the office. She was a young woman in her maybe late 30s and came to see me, and I knew her from the outside because I knew her husband and I knew her family. She came to me and she said, I'm in a desperate state. She said, my husband had given me some painkillers, and I started using those painkillers and I became addicted. And just so the audience knows, you know, Lou, that there are certain people who have a much greater predilection towards getting addicted than others.
Right.
I've had kids who came to me, they said, one young man said he had 4 wisdom teeth pulled out at the same time. The doctor wrote him a prescription for OxyContin, hundreds of pills. He says, after the first 2 days, he says, I knew I was hooked.
Right.
I couldn't stop taking this. Not everybody is in that situation. Some people don't even like it.
Right.
But anyway, this doctor's wife said she started taking the OxyContin. She got addicted to it, and she said, now I couldn't stop. I kept telling my husband, give me more pills, and finally he said, he was writing the prescriptions himself. He got concerned and said, no more for you. Now you've got to switch to this or that. But she said, I couldn't. I tried, but I was going through withdrawals.
Right.
She's already going through withdrawals. So she said she started stealing his prescriptions from his pad on his desk, writing herself out prescriptions for opiates, taking them to local pharmacies. At some point, the husband was called by one of the pharmacies and says, hey, by the way, do you know that your wife is coming in here and other pharmacies locally and getting herself prescriptions for opiates? This doesn't look like your handwriting nor your signature. So the doctor got concerned, spoke to his wife, and called all the pharmacies within like a 50-mile radius and said, you may not give my wife any opiates. Call me if she ever shows up. Slowly but surely, he just shut off all avenues for her to get drugs. When she came to my office, she says, I am ready to go to the street, cross the bridge, go into Harlem, New York, and just buy these drugs on the street, she says, and I don't want to do that. Before I did that, I'd rather just kill myself. What state have I come to? I've heard you can help me. So I said, I'm so sorry. I can help you if you were in the hospital, because we have this injection, buprenorphine. I can't prescribe it as an outpatient. She says, well, you got to do it, because otherwise this is what I'm going to do. And I felt really bad. She was in pain, so I actually brought in that afternoon syringes and injections from the hospital and gave her the injections in my office. It was like a miracle. She said, "But what do I do when this wears off?" So I called up a local pharmacist friend of mine and asked him to make what are known as troches. Troches are homemade capsules. Pharmacies make them with the active ingredient of buprenorphine mixed with a gel-like substance that you can then take. So the pharmacist said, "I'll try and make these. I've never done it before." He did. I prescribed them to this person, and she called. I said, "Keep in touch. Let me know how that works." And she said, "It works great." She says, "I don't feel the need for the injection. I don't feel the need for the heroin. I feel great." She says, "I used to be a jogger. I had given that up ever since I started doing this." She said, "I'm back to jogging." She said, "I feel back to normal." She said, "I feel like life is back with me again." So that was my first experience with an outpatient. Second experience, well, I've had thousands of experiences, but I'll just give you a few of them.
Sure.
I was in the emergency room. I was called to see this young girl, must be 19 or so, following a suicide attempt. Police had picked her up. She was standing at a local bridge and about to jump when some passersby caught a hold of her, called the police. The police brought her to the emergency room. Her parents were with her, and she was crying, very desperate, very attractive young girl who said to me, I said, "Tell me what exactly happened?" And I asked her parents to step outside in the waiting room. She says, "Can my parents hear me?" And I said, "Well, I don't think so." But I said, "To be sure, I'll take them all the way to the outside hospital waiting room, and I'll come back." Took them outside, came back. I said, "What's the story?" And she said, "Look, I'm a very, very bright student." She says, "I was slated, a straight A student. I was slated to go to medical school." She says, "And I fell in love with somebody when I was a senior." And the person says, "If you really love me, you will take this," and offered me heroin. She said, "I went directly from never having done any alcohol or drugs or marijuana or anything to snorting heroin with him." She says, "I do love you." And he says, "Then do this with me. You'll see that together the doors of paradise will open for us." And she snorted heroin, and she went immediately into being a heroin addict. And she says, "Forget studies, forget medical school." She says, "All I could do was to crave drugs." She says, "I'm an only child, an only daughter of my parents. They would give anything for me. They don't know any of this." She says, "And that's why I wanted to kill myself." She says, "I've been stealing from them. And even if they found out, they'd say, 'Take anything. Whatever we have is yours.'"
Right.
She said, "I've been stealing from them to buy first OxyContins. When I couldn't afford that," she says, "I was doing other stuff." And then she said, in my college, she used to go, in my college, she says, there were signs to say, if you want to be a model or a stripper, she says, you can make instant money. So she says, a friend of mine and myself, both of whom were doing this, went and started saying, "Okay, we'll do dancing. We won't strip." So we started dancing in the tables, around the tables of where these strip joints were. And she says, from there we progressed to stripping. And she says, I'm at the point now where I'm being propositioned for going even further.
Right.
And she says, and I'm thinking about it. And I said, before I do that, I'd rather kill myself. So she says, that's why I was suicidal. So I said, look, I have treatment for you, both inpatient as well as outpatient. You can't leave here now. You have to be admitted. Mm-hmm. But I think that I can get you off of these opiates, but I will need your parents to know about this so we can all form a team and work on this together. Initially, she was reluctant, but then she agreed after I gave her the buprenorphine and she felt back to normal. I brought her parents in. They talked. She didn't tell them anything. I didn't tell them anything. Until when she was closer to discharge, and I told the parents this, we worked out a plan, and I gave her, by that time, I think buprenorphine had come in the form of Suboxone tablets that you could take. And every week, the parents would bring her to my office. I would ask her how things are going. She was doing very well. And I told her, I said, now we can start weaning off the Suboxone. And I said, always make sure that you have at least 1 or 2 tablets wrapped in aluminum foil in your pocketbook or in your wallet. And she said, fine. One day, she had come to my office by herself On her way back, the highway was packed. She says there was a traffic jam. She says, I knew the way around it. But in order to get off that, she said, there were local streets where nobody else goes because it's a very dangerous area. But that happens to be where her dealer was.
Yeah.
So she says, I had been off the Suboxone, completely off the Suboxone, doing well. But as I got off the ramp, she says, I started breaking out into a sweat and my heart started beating. And I said, oh, if I just take a right here, I'm right there. I can just get one little hit and nobody would know the better. I could go back onto the Suboxone.
Amazing how the mind works, huh?
Amazing.
Yeah.
And she says, I'm driving towards the dealer. I knew it'll take 1 minute. I'd just go there, get the stuff, pay him, because I was flush with cash by this time. And she said, I'll get the thing. But she said, I was nervous, I was scared, I was sweating, my heart was beating, every part of me was trembling. And then I remembered that you had said to put 2 tablets wrapped in aluminum foil. I pulled over, opened my bag, took out the pill, actually took out both of them, put them under my tongue. She says, within instant, she says, I had no desire to go there. She said, I just turned around, my body calmed down, the sweating went away, I had no desire to go to him. I got back on the highway, I said, heck with the traffic, and I stayed and I went home. So that story actually brought into great focus the importance of making sure that the person has Suboxone on him or her at all times. Because the other story that I wanted to say is about a man in...
It's really kind of scary the way the mind can trigger the addiction.
Well, it's the mind, yes. It's the mind
in this
and the
particular
body.
case, yeah.
Right. So a man and a woman had come to me. This guy looked like a bear. He was huge and hair all over. Turned out he was a Harley Davidson motorcycle rider.
Yep.
Big guy, and his wife looked like him too. Very nice people. But they said they were both addicted to heroin. His sister was a local politician, and so she had recommended that he come to me. So he brought his wife. I put them on Suboxone. They were doing very well. He said that he worked as a manager or general manager or salesperson in a Harley Davidson showroom. Mm-hmm. And I put them both on Suboxone. After a period of time, they were both off the Suboxone. At that time, I was trying very hard to push people to get off the Suboxone, and many succeeded, many didn't. He got off the Suboxone, and sometime after this happened, he called me up, came into my office, and told me this story, which I would like to tell everybody. He said he was off the Suboxone and feeling good about himself. His wife was at home, also off the Suboxone. And this one potential customer came in to buy a Harley Davidson. They're walking around looking at all the Harleys. Suddenly, he feels, the customer feels pain in his back. He said, I've got a bad back. And he reaches into his jeans and pulls out a big bottle of all kinds of pills. Mm-hmm. All of them are painkillers, opiates, etc.
Yeah.
And without counting them, puts them in his hand, a whole bunch, pops them in his mouth in front of my patient who's watching. And then he sees him watching him aghast, and he says, you want some?
Yeah.
And offers him the whole bottle. And my patient says, he says, I went white. I was so tempted to do it. He said, I said, excuse me. I turned around. I was so tempted, just like that girl getting off the highway. I was so tempted to do it. He says, I was shaking, went into the bathroom, came back to my office, called my wife, and said, this is what happened. She said, don't forget, you've got those 2 tablets in your wallet. Take them.
Right.
He says, I took one, and I put it under my tongue. I felt much better. I came outside. I told him, get the hell out of here. Take your pills. Don't buy your motorcycle. Never come back again. And he says, I got rid of him. But the point is that these things do control the desire.
Right.
Handled right, handled correctly, people can get off the opiates. It's not 100% success. Like the patient who was talking to you before, he said, not everybody benefits, because you can work around this. You can be taking the buprenorphine, have no desire to do it, but still do it.
Right.
And so that can't be helped with any...
But these 2 instances that you just talked about where the mind created a withdrawal that wasn't there. In other words, they were having withdrawal symptoms when they were presented with the temptation or the pattern of their drug use. right? The person was offered drugs, or the woman who went and was driving near her dealer. That was, we talked about psychosomatic a few sessions ago. It's not psychosomatic, but the mind triggered the withdrawal symptoms.
So what you're saying, this is how the body works, right?
Yeah.
You may not be hungry. Somebody says, "Are you hungry for
Right.
lunch?" And you say, "No, I'm not hungry." But then you see something
somebody
that's
eating.
appealing to you.
Yeah.
You say, "Wow!"
Yeah.
And right away you say, "Hey, I didn't think I was hungry, but looking at that, my mouth is salivating."
Right.
So your mind triggers physiological autonomic responses, such as the development of an appetite, saliva, gurgling stomach when you see something that you really want. So the same thing happens with these drugs. Like the patient was saying, he said, I take a half a tablet, and most of the days I'm fine with that, but occasionally I need to. I understand and recognize my body. There are times that I need to take the second half at night.
Suboxone, the goal is to wean them off the Suboxone.
Well, that used to be my initial goal.
Yeah.
But a lot of people failed.
Mm-hmm.
When I took them off, temptations would occur, and they would say, I couldn't do it. I said, "I haven't heard from you. What happened?" Say, "I went back to using again." And then you say, "Well, come on back," and say, "Nah, it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm fine." So you lose a lot of people, and the question is it worth it? Here's this guy that we spoke to earlier that has been doing it for 15, 20 years, and he takes a half a pill a day, and he says, "My life is fine." Oh, disclosure, I haven't seen him.
Right.
I don't prescribe anything. I don't have a license to prescribe at this point, so that
Right.
I have no stock in the company. I don't even know what company makes Suboxone. I have nothing here that I'm trying to promote the use of Suboxone. What I'm saying is, when I used to practice, my mindset was, I've seen a lot of people go back and lose them, many to overdoses and
Right.
deaths, when they stopped taking the Suboxone. And I often wondered, would it have been better if they were taking a half a tablet or a full tablet? What's worse,
Right.
taking that tablet or dying? Or being a thief and stealing and
Right.
using and stuff like that. So it's a hard question. I don't know, but if you look at all the people who are dying everywhere, my question is, so if they were to instead take Suboxone, what's the harm? And I don't know that I have an answer. I'm just raising the question for our audience and everybody else to think about.
Right.
So here it is, folks. This is about opiates. Our next session, what I'd like to do is to talk about other psychiatric disorders. Maybe you'll talk about agoraphobia, anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders. But this program is for you to help others, patients who have faced similar issues. So any feedback you give me, you can write, correct, Lou? They can write on
Yes.
the page, and I'll be happy to respond and incorporate that into future programs. So thank you very much.
Everyone visit Memoirs of a Psychiatrist on Facebook for all the episodes, all the sessions of the program. So catch up, and we'll be looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much.